Well, that was a pleasant surprise. It seems that the lead producer for Final Fantasy XVI, Naoki Yoshida, has been giving a number of press interviews recently, and they have all been released online overnight. And there are some new nuggets of information contained within, so let's get into the meat of it straight away, shall we? So a number of online sites, including Square Enix themselves, have taken part in these interviews with Yoshida, and I think, to be honest with you, most of the information is pretty much the same throughout. I guess they were given the sort of questions they could ask. But I did find that this interview with Press Start gave a little bit more detail and pretty much contains all of the information. So let's go ahead and focus on this one. I'm gonna just close the others for now. And let's just get straight into it, shall we? And I guess minor story spoilers for this first part, because this is going to be a brief overview of the world itself. I don't want to say an overview of the story, it's more of the setting. So what Yoshida reveals here, and we did know about some of this before, but it's nice to get some clarity, is that the land of Final Fantasy XVI, the world, is going to be divided into several kingdoms that are effectively all competing for resources. Now, each of these kingdoms has their own crystal, and it's this crystal that provides energy for that particular kingdom in the form of ether. Now, the problem is, and I'm guessing this is where the story is going to be set up, is that the energy that these crystals are providing is starting to dry up, which means that each of these kingdoms is going to be vying for control of the other crystals. And this is where the Eikons come into play. So the Eikons are the summons of Final Fantasy XVI, but they're not just small-scale summons, as we've seen in previous Final Fantasy games, but these are going to be epic, grandiose summons that are more akin to nuclear weapons or weapons of mass destruction. So each of the kingdoms possesses at least one of these icons, but they're more there as a deterrent rather than something to be used, according to Yoshida, similar to nuclear weapons in our world at the moment. But because of the desperation that these kingdoms are facing in the wake of the dry up of the ether, they are going to start using their weapons of mass destruction, aka the Eikons. Now, my first impression is that this is a pretty ballsy move for Square to take the direction of Final Fantasy XVI story into. I fully understand that there's going to be certain cliches involved. We're going to be saving the world, let's be honest, at the end of the day. But it's not about the cliches. Every game and story has those. It's about the execution of them. And I feel that this could really work. Now, I suspect that some people, based on the description that Naoki Yoshida is giving here about nuclear weapons and the like, may feel that this is a little bit too close to comfort in terms of the real world situation and whatnot, and that it may encroach on the escapism that is given by gaming and by storytelling. But I don't think it is. Let's be honest, we're not talking about nuclear weapons. That's just an analogy. We're talking about awesome looking icons and summons and special effects and just an epic scale battle system that we're going to be talking about. And we're not talking about the modern world, we're talking about a medieval European style fantasy world. So I'm not concerned about it being too close to real life. That's just a comparison so that we can understand the scale of the world that we're getting into. And I'm actually kind of hyped because, like I say, this sounds like it's going to be tackling some pretty dark themes. And we know that Final Fantasy XVI is going to be rated mature, which, let's be honest, I think is a first for a mainline Final Fantasy game. I know Final Fantasy Origins did, but this is a mainline entry in the series, and I'm looking forward to seeing where Square are going to be taking things with this game over the coming months and what have you, as they start to reveal some more information. And if you do enjoy the Final Fantasy games, please do remember to subscribe. Not only do I keep you guys notified of all the various updates and rumours as they happen, but I also live stream many of the games as well throughout the week, and we do have a lot of fun on those streams. Anyway, back to the topic. And something that has been addressed here, which I'm glad it has because I was a little bit confused after the previous Final Fantasy XVI trailer, is how it is that Clive is seemingly able to summon multiple icons, when it has already been made known to us that an icon is linked to a dominant, and every dominant is only able to be linked to one icon. So why is Clive seemingly the exception to this? Well, this apparent contradiction is a major story plot point that Naoki Yoshida is not going to spoil for us, but it is something that if you picked up on in the trailer, then it is going to be addressed in the game. So yeah, I'm glad about that. And since we're talking about Eikons, let's just discuss the battle system, because we did get some new info about it. First of all, it was kind of inaccurate for me to talk about how Clive summons Eikons, because technically we're not summoning in this game. As a bit of a divergence from previous Final Fantasy games, Clive doesn't summon, he transforms. He transforms into the Eikons that are going to be used in battle. So that's something that sounds really kind of exciting, and I'm looking forward to seeing how that feels when we play it. But it's also all going to occur in real time, which means, from what I understand, from what Yoshida is saying here, if you want to use an ability that Ifrit has, then when you select that ability, it seems that Clive is in battle going to quickly transform into Ifrit and cast that ability. And then you can select the ability of another Eikon that he has access to, and you're going to transform away from Ifrit into that other Eikon in order to cast that ability. And he used an example that you can actually synergize different Eikons, so that you can, for example, use one of the new Eikons to be transformed into, and then lift your foes into the air, and then quickly, while the foes are in the air, transform immediately into Titan in order to bring them smashing back down again. So it sounds like a really awesome system, and hopefully the execution of it is going to provide tons and tons of fun in terms of the new battle system. Because I've got to say, Square Enix are taking some risks here with the battle system. And they take risks all the time with their Final Fantasy games, so that's nothing new. Sometimes those risks play off and you get some really fun systems, sometimes not so much, but it sounds like Square are dedicated to putting a lot of time and a lot of effort into the battle system here to make sure that it definitely ends up on the more fun side of the spectrum. But even though the battle system is going to be action-based and real-time, it's not going to stay the same all the way through. It's going to change dependent on the types of encounters that are happening. So there may be battles, Yoshida says, that are using a 3D shooter type interface. There may be battles that are using a more traditional beat-em-up style interface. And it all depends on what's happening at the time, the scale of the Eikon fights. You know, some of these Eikons are absolutely massive, as we've seen in the trailer, and we're going to have some huge, epic, Godzilla-sized battles going on here. So it'd be really interesting to see how the battle system copes with that. And it sounds like Square, as I say, have put a lot of thought into making sure it's done right. I'm sure those of you that follow my videos regularly will know that I'm more of a traditionalist. I do love the aging Final Fantasy battle systems, the ATBs, the turn-based systems, and all of that good stuff. But hey, I know I'm a bit of a dinosaur, and the kids nowadays love all this action stuff, so I'm sure it's going to be a lot of fun as we are begrudgingly pulled into the 21st century. I am happy, I'll be honest, that they haven't gone the whole Souls-like genre approach, because that is just not for me. And I guess that's why they made Final Fantasy Origins, to appease you Final Fantasy fans that do love that sort of combat, and I know there are many of you. And talking about battles, one new system that we are now learning about for the very first time is that there are going to be skill trees for Clive. And these are going to revolve around powering up the Eikons that you have gained access to. So you can learn new abilities, probably new stats, I would imagine. And of course, you're only going to have a limited number of points that you can invest in, presumably by leveling up and what have you, so you're going to have to choose wisely how the Eikons are going to be powered up and the build you want to create. But the good news is that you will be able to reset your build and reinvest your points an unlimited number of times, so that you can really have a play about and practice with the type of combat that you want to engage with the type of power that you want to see from your Eikons. And yeah, hopefully that's implemented well, and a little bit of player choice can go a long way. Of course, despite all that action, combat and what have you, and the real-time battles, this is still a Final Fantasy game. It is still a role-playing game, and having a leveling up system of some kind is going to be essential. So yeah, it's nice just to have confirmation that we are getting one. Something that has been noticed through the various trailers is that it seems there is going to be no party in Final Fantasy XVI, as everything has revolved around Clive. Well, we now have official confirmation, and that is that there is sort of going to be a party, but not a player control party. So the player will only ever be controlling Clive. However, there will be AI party members that join and leave depending on the current story situation. So I'm thinking this is going to be somewhat similar to Final Fantasy XII, where you had guest party members join from time to time, and then they would leave, but you will just have no control over them at all in Final Fantasy XVI. So yeah, what do you guys think about that? And the next topic that has been talked about in some of these interviews, in fact all of them I believe, is how is Final Fantasy XVI going to compare to previous Final Fantasy games? And in particular, because the producer is Naoki Yoshida, the same guy that produces and directs Final Fantasy XIV, how is 16 going to compare to that game in terms of the world? Now, the answer is effectively, it's going to be very different. Final Fantasy XIV is an MMO, and as such, it has a huge open world, which has been expanded upon several times through various expansions and whatnot. Final Fantasy XVI is going to be much more linear. It's not going to be an open world playground. In fact, Naoki Yoshida's own words are that it is going to be more akin to playing an interactive movie. Now, I know that phrase is possibly going to scare some of you and give you nightmares back to Final Fantasy XIII and the on-rails experience that provided. I don't think it's going to be like that, because that was universally criticised, and let's be honest, I think that even Square would recognise that that wouldn't be popular. But it may be something similar to what we got with Final Fantasy VII Remake, which is a linear experience, but not in the same way that Final Fantasy XIII was a linear experience. And let's be honest, the Final Fantasy franchise as a whole has pretty much always been narrative driven rather than an open world space. But yeah, that's one of those things I would like you to talk about yourselves in the comments and share your own thoughts as to whether you would have preferred an open world experience more akin to Final Fantasy XIV, or whether you're happier with a more traditional linear Final Fantasy experience. And finally, you may have already noticed that I had this tab open, When is Autumn 2022? Why have I got that selected? Well, that's because it has now been revealed that in autumn of this year, there is going to be another trailer being released. So just to give you guys the timescale there, this is the UK dates. Autumn starts end of September and finishes towards the end of December. So last quarter of this year, we can expect the next trailer for Final Fantasy XVI as we go into next year. And it has been hinted, remember the game's coming out summer of next year, 2023, but it has been hinted that there may be a demo being released towards the start of next year so that people can get a feel for the combat. So if that plays out, then not actually that long to go until you can, start playing Final Fantasy XVI in some form. But there we have it then, guys. So what do you think about this information dump? I'm incredibly excited for Final Fantasy XVI, as you can probably tell. I think Square are taking some big risks here. I really do. And hopefully, more of those risks are going to pay off than those that don't. But we'll have to wait and see. But please do share your own thoughts, as always, down below. And don't forget you can subscribe to my YouTube channel for various news updates going forward. I do also cover a lot of the other Final Fantasy games. We do live streams around here and just generally have a lot of fun. So it'd be great if you would choose to stick around and join us in all of that good stuff. But thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next time. Bye, folks.